The Big 12 was not humiliated in the college football playoffs. Texas Tech Red Raiders lost to the Oregon Ducks did not humiliate the Big 12. The Big 12 is a Power 4 conference, and that's not going away anytime soon. We're going to be talking about Dan Wolken's article about the so-called Big 12's humiliation in the playoffs. I will agree with Dan Wolken on this. I do believe that Brett Yormark continues to fumble the football when it comes to the discussion, at least in public and probably in private, about what the future college football playoff format should look like. Welcome to episode 465 of College Football's Peek Around the Corner with your host, Greg Pflugar. We cover everything in college football because we love everything in college football. And if you do as well, please subscribe to our channel, smash the like button if you like our content, share the video with your family and friends. Let's not waste any more time. Let's get to the Dan Wolken's article. Texas Tech's blowout loss. Just the latest college football playoff humiliation for Brett Yormark and the Big 12. For a fleeting moment early in the Orange Bowl fourth quarter, Texas Tech opportunity to salvage one of the most embarrassing performances in the history of the college football playoff was at hand. Come on. Are we serious here? Are we doing the old thing where we are all offended by a blowout in the playoffs Are we doing that again? The Red Raiders certainly didn't deserve it. Their offense had spent the first 2.5 hours bumbling through the playbook, unable to block, unable to throw, unable to catch. The only thing they've done with any proficiency was to turn the ball over, and yet here they were, down just 2 scores to Oregon, threatening to find the end zone for the first time all day. The Ducks' own mistakes had provided a tourniquet, and the Texas Tech Red Raiders stood a mere 9 yards away from a touchdown that would have turned up the pressure on a team that hadn't been given any reason to doubt its destiny. A championship team would have scored there. Instead, what Texas Tech did, how can you throw the ball, interception from quarterback Baron Morton, provided another layer of cement on a narrative college football could no longer ignore. In a moment when administrators, fans, and media members are questioning the viability of schools outside the 4 power conferences, even pushing to exclude them from the CFP, it's time to consider whether the Big 12 is perpetuating a fraud on college football. In this collection of schools still worthy? Is this collection of schools still worthy of being called a power conference? We didn't play good enough, Texas Tech coach Joey McGuire said moments after Oregon wrapped up its 23-0 victory. It really wasn't the patch on anybody's arm. Perhaps conference affiliation had nothing to do with Texas Tech. Measly 9 first downs, going 6 for 19 on 3rd, 4th down conversions, or turning the football over 4 times. But Texas Tech was the 9th team to represent the Big 12 since the CFP began a dozen years ago. It's the 8th to have lost. TCU's upset over Michigan in 2022 semifinals remains the only time a Big 12 team has won a playoff game. Those are facts. You can't hide the facts, no question about it. I'll tell you my comments after we get through this article, but again, that is true. That is true. This Texas Tech team was supposed to be different than the undersized gimmickry of the Big 12 usually sends to the playoff slot. Backed by billionaire former player Cody Campbell, the Red Raiders spent a reported $28 million putting together this roster. They were physically elite on defense. They didn't just win the Big 12. They battered it into submission, beating BYU, clearly the league's second best team, by scores of 29-7, 34-7. And even on a day Oregon struggled with the mistakes and offensive execution, Texas Tech wasn't even in their same weight class. Well, neither are 130 other teams. Again, Do we have to be this offended by a blowout loss? Why in college football do we get so offended with blowout losses? Are we this offended by Alabama? I'm not. I'm not offended by Alabama blowout loss. I'm not. I truly am not. Indiana's a fantastic football team. Tennessee got blown out by the Buckeyes in last year's playoffs. I'm not offended by that. I'm not offended by Indiana getting beat by that incredible Notre Dame football team last year. I'm not offended by the Red Raiders meeting their match against the Oregon Ducks. What is going on? What is going on? Don't be so offended by blowout losses. They happen in sports. This shouldn't discredit them, Oregon coach Dan Lanning. I remember this feeling last year. Yes! Oregon they got their doors blown out by the Buckeyes. Does that mean that Oregon lost their credibility last year? No, of course not. He's right. This should not discredit Texas Tech, which managed to wring more out of this season than any team in program history. It should, however, discredit the Big 12. Again, that doesn't really make any logical sense. Sorry, Dan Wolken, but this article doesn't make any logical sense at all. Maybe 30 yards away from where Morton threw that final interception in a room just past the tunnel at Hard Rock Stadium, the Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark met with reporters about an hour before Thursday's kickoff. Now, this is where I do agree with Dan Wolken in his article. This is where I think he absolutely nails it. Put down your comments in the comments section below the video. Let me know where I got it all wrong once again. Back to the article. I love our chances on Thursday, Yormark said, while insisting that the outcome of the game had nothing to do with the influence his conference wields in discussions about the future of the CFP. We have a big voice in that room, Yormark said, suggesting on 3 different occasions that he sits alongside Greg Sankey, Petiti, and Phillips as equals on the throne. But Yormark, who worked for NASCAR, Brooklyn Nets, Jay-Z before finding his way to college sports 3.5 years ago, did not offer the same courtesy when the topic turned to the Group of 5 inclusion. As conference commissioners consider whether to expand the playoff next year, ESPN has set a January 23rd deadline to figure out a new structure or stay within the current 12-team format. The hottest of the hot buttons will be whether they establish a new standard for non-power conference teams to make the playoff. This year's inclusion of Tulane and Madison, both of which were blown out in the first round games, is certainly never going to happen again, but some administrators in leagues like the American Conference, the reconfigured Pac-12, and the Mountain West believe negative commentary around the concept of inclusion is part of a coordinated effort to essentially kick them out of the playoff altogether. Asked whether he believed there was consensus among the power conference commissioners that a Group of 5 representatives should be guaranteed a spot in the next iteration of the playoff, Yormark's swarmy response practically gave away the game. This is Yormark. Frankly, there's a great question. That's a great question. And I don't want to speak to that, he said. I mean, listen, there are 10 commissioners and obviously Notre Dame that are on the management committee, and we all communicate. We're all being very thoughtful about it. I will say that the Power 4 commissioners are spending more time to work through that expansion might look like, but there's a lot of things we have to weigh and consider, and we'll see what happens. Brett Yormark, I don't know what is going on, but you have fumbled the ball again. When you are asked that question about the G5 inclusion of the playoffs, are you going to set a higher burden, a higher hurdle for the G5 to jump over? In other words, it's not going to be good enough for them just to be have their top ranked champion of the G5, G6 to get to the playoffs. Maybe they're going to have to finish in the top 15 ranks, 16 ranks, in the top 20 to qualify. You're going to put a more higher qualification on G6 inclusion? The answer should have been simply, no, I am not for that. But Yormark can say it. He could not say. Dan Wolken on that part of the article is absolutely 100% correct. You start messing around with G6 inclusion in the playoffs. You start limiting their access more and more. Brett Yormark, you're going to start limiting your own action. If you're going to put weight on the G6 performance in the playoffs, then people are going to turn to you, Yormark, and they're going to put weight on the Big 12's performance in the playoffs. You know, I don't really have a problem with the Big 12's performance in the playoffs. I get it if you are a fan of a Big 12 school. You want the Big 12 to do better and better and better. You do not want this result. I get that. You don't want your best team to get beat 23-0. I understand that. We all understand that. But you know what? Can we be honest? Can we just be honest? Right now in this world of college football, the Southeastern Conference and the Big Ten are the two best conferences. They are. They just simply are. The ACC and the Big 12 are next. There's only so many wins, and there's an equal amount of losses in these playoffs. Blowouts happen in every single round and including the championship game from time to time. Texas Tech met up with an Oregon team that was just really better that day. And maybe the Oregon Ducks are a whole lot better than the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Last year, the Buckeyes were a lot better than the Ducks in the playoffs. Last year, Notre Dame was a way lot better than Indiana Hoosiers in the playoffs. And look what Indiana has done this year. Look at what Oregon has done this year. They're meeting in semifinals. What is not to say that Texas Tech is going to be following the same path next year? Dan Wolken, the Big 12 was not humiliated in the playoffs, in my opinion. You know what? Texas Tech lost. That's what happens. Alabama lost. Tennessee. The Buckeyes, the national champions, they got beat by Miami. What place did Miami come in the ACC? I know they did not come in the top 2. Did they come in the top 3, top 4? What did the tiebreakers say again? Who cares? The Buckeyes had a sensational football team this year, but they could not get the job done because Miami got the job done. One of those two teams were going to win. One of those two teams were going to lose. If Miami would have lost that game, would we all be saying that the ACC was humiliated? I'm not buying into any of this. Sorry, I'm not. But what I am buying into is Dan Wolken's argument that Brett Yormark, he's fumbling the football here. Do not raise the bar for G6 inclusion because you're next. Big 12, lay down some buffer between the narrowing of the football playoff axis between you and the G5, G6. Do not raise the bar for G6. In fact, Brett Yormark, as you all know, should be on the bandwagon for the army of 24, but he's not. But now he's not really out there in public supporting, at least maintaining the current football playoff axis for G6. He's not even doing that, and that is a large mistake from Brett Yormark. So I don't get it. I don't get what Brett Yormark is doing. Dan Wolken's part of the article, I agree with that. But the other part, Big 12, they were not humiliated. It's called competition. In competition, things happen. Somebody's got to lose. Somebody's got to win. Does the Big 12 need to perform better in the college football playoffs? Yes, that would be great for the conference. It would help them so much when it comes to evaluation, media partners, more money, more exposure, more bragging rights, helping it on the recruiting trail, getting better coaches, all that. And you know what? The Big 12 is trying to take action. They're trying to get this third-party money deal to bring an infusion in cash. The Big 12 is working it. Do they need to win more playoff games? Yes, of course. But the Big 12 was not humiliated. This Oregon Duck team would have whooped up on a lot of other Big Ten teams like they did. They would have whooped up on a lot of SEC teams. They would have whooped up on a lot of ACC teams. It just so happens that was the Red Raiders' opponent. And again, I'll say this. Oregon was in Red Raiders position last year. So was the Indiana Hoosiers last year. The Miami Hurricanes did not quite make the playoffs, and look what they've done this year. Look out for the Red Raiders next year. Don't shut the door on the Big 12. And for Dan Wolken, a little of this might be... He might have an axe to grind against the Big 12, to be honest with you. We'll talk more about that in our live show later today. I'm not going to say I'm not going to say anything out of confidence. I've had a lot of discussions with Dan Wolken in the past years. A lot of discussions on the pursuit of the Memphis Tigers trying to get into the Big 12. And I'll talk more about that globally in a live show. But so there may be some axe grinding going on when it comes to this article, why he kind of made it so personal when it comes to the humiliation word. The Big 12 was not humiliated. The Big 12's champion got beat. That happens. That happens in the college football playoffs. Put down your comments in the comments section below the video. Let me know what I got right, what I got wrong, what Dan Wolken got right, what Dan Wolken got wrong, what Brett Yormark is doing right, what he's doing wrong. Put it down. I read all your comments. Until next time, from all of us at PATC, to all of you, please, y'all take great care of each other. Thank you so very much.